Hello and welcome to COVID Conversations here on WNCU 90.7 FM, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm your host, Kimberley Cartwright. I'm the News and Public Affairs Director here at WNCU, and we're using the Zoom platform to talk about how COVID-19 is affecting our world. This program is made possible by Duke University School of Medicine and the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, the African American COVID Task Force Plus of Durham, and the Save a Life campaign presented by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, KTSU, and WNCU 90.7 FM. Now, I have the good pleasure of having as my guest today, Dr. DeLon Canterbury. He is a board certified geriatric pharmacist and the president and chief executive officer of GeriatRX Inc. in Durham. And we're going to talk about the negative versus positive information and the impact on social health from COVID-19. Hello, Dr. Canterbury.
Hey, appreciate you having me back. I hope you're doing well. Thanks, Kim.
I'm doing very well. We certainly appreciate you being a friend of WNCU. It's always my good pleasure to talk to you. I want to ask you this first question. Can we talk about negative images of COVID-19 as it relates to people not going to get shots stage in the game?
Yeah, as you are well
why
aware.
Yeah, why is a little bit more, why is listening to negative talk about COVID-19 so entrenching for people?
That's a great question, and truly the reason why the media is in business. And so we like to harp on the negative sometimes. And unfortunately, when it comes to COVID, there's always new information that's coming at you a million miles per hour. It's easy to get caught up and really frustrated in the negativity that's out there. So some of it, of course, is clickbait. Some of it is to get you to look at an article and get their likes up. But some of it is true. And the truth is we are not quite out of the woods yet when it comes to COVID. So when it comes to new variants, new deaths, new cases, these are all to be expected. But you do want to look at some of the positives. And to counter the negative imaging, we can actually get more done with more positive messaging. But truth be told, the negative stuff sells. So you're going to have all types of news stations, red or blue, talk about what's going to make you want to lean in and listen more. And that's what gets the ratings up. And the very much same goes for social media information. You know, it's not as if we're seeing a ton of viral good info. A lot of the good sometimes get drowned by the bad, regardless of just COVID or any other topic. So that's kind of human nature, but I think it's safe that it's important that we protect our peace, protect our space when we're consuming this information, and at least seeing if it's a veritable and credible source before you get emotionally affected by that type of news.
So a credible source. So when you're moving through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you think every source, probably, if you are a consumer and you are watching and taking in information in that vein, you think whatever people put out there is true. So how do you weed through what's not good, negative, and then, you know, what is good, positive for be able to consume that information and heed whatever it says for your betterment?
Sure. Again, part of it is protecting your peace, but the second piece, when you go a little bit further, is seeing who's behind the publication or the article. Are they citing someone who's literally working in infectious disease? Is it a healthcare professional? Or is it someone from the block that you know from the barber salon? You don't really know. And so you want to first ask, who is sharing the information? Is there any other type of bias that this person may have to get you to think one way or another? So that comes on you a little bit, but you want to make sure it's not some type of agenda, because people unfortunately do things maliciously. And that's where misinformation, where people unknowingly share info that's maybe false or wrong, compares to disinformation, where certain people, the smaller percentage of people, maliciously intend to spread harmful information. So these two get construed often as the same. But the truth is, you got to start thinking, what's the bias behind this article? Who's putting it out there? Is this reporter someone who is talking with healthcare correspondents regarding COVID, or is it some kind of hearsay? Another way to look at this is an acronym that I use, and it's called FLICC. So FLICC. These are the 5 tenets of science denialism. And guess what? We've had people denying science facts for hundreds of years, since the beginning of time. And this acronym stands for people that are fake experts, right? So people who basically have a doctorate in English, but they're talking about COVID vaccines. That doesn't make sense, right? You're not going to see a foot doctor if you have a sight problem, right?
Right.
The next one is called as L, logical fallacies. So basically, a good example is like something natural is good versus something unnatural is bad, where that's not always true. It's just something is natural and something is unnatural in terms of nature. So sometimes we think herbal products are safe, but the medicines we take by a pharma company is bad. And we can both say that they both have their benefits, right? That's logical fallacies. The next one is a logical expectation. So a lot of people may assume, hey, I got my booster, so I should be 100% cured. I don't know why my friend is still getting COVID after his second or third shot. We cannot assume that everything in medicine is 100% protective. So that way, this expectation of thinking I should be in the clear is completely wrong and misguided. There's also C, where some people, when it comes to these articles, will just cherry pick data. So they'll have 100 trials, and then they'll choose the one trial that shows, for instance, that Plaquenil is the bomb and it works, where 99 others say it doesn't. So some people use that as a form of misinformation as well. And last but not least, there's conspiracy theory. So this is the final C in FLICC. Conspiracy theory is really just a rabbit hole of, well, you're a part of the problem, you're a conspiracy theorist, whether it's right-leaning or left-leaning like QAnon, which is right. If you go down this rabbit hole on social media by people who are citing conspiracy theories, it's almost a waste of your energy. So don't fall prey to those things that you see on your Facebook or on your WhatsApp.
Okay. There is like an abundance and overabundance of information, but I want to talk about fear for just a little bit.
Yeah.
Fear as a negative. So there are people probably out there who have fear of getting a shot for whatever reason, and they don't go to get the COVID vaccine. What information can you provide that would counter any negative stigma associated with shot in arms, especially for adults?
Mm-hmm. So you're right. I would really tailor the messaging to where that person's fear is coming from. As a pharmacist, it's really important to not only build trust, but have an open line of communication where there's no judgment for that person. And, in the beginning of the pandemic, we were citing Tuskegee experiment, and the North Carolina sterilization projects. I'm not hearing those arguments as much now, but I have seen fear lead to an uptick in booster vaccinations because people are worried about the Omicron variant. I would want to first know, what exactly are the person's fears? Is it something that happened to a friend in their circle? Is it a personal anecdote that they have? What are they hearing? Because your messaging depends on what information they're getting from and where they are coming from. So once you know that where they're coming from, we could talk through those barriers mano a mano and get down to the nitty-gritty. And so I like to use what's called a fact sandwich. And so if someone tells me some type of misinformation, like say, I don't know, I'm pregnant and I'm worried about getting vaccinated, I think it'll harm my baby, you don't have enough information, right? That was a really common argument. First I'll state the importance of where they're coming from. Okay, I get it. If you are pregnant and you don't know the future of this, I would be worried too. I wouldn't want to harm my baby. But then I will go into further stating the misinformation and talk about, is it okay if I could share some more info with you about this that I've read recently? Is it okay if I, share something I've learned or an opinion that's been shown to be counter to that point? And usually people are more open than you just saying, oh, that's wrong, so here's why you're wrong, because they get more defensive, right? So I give that, I state the misinformation, and then I give facts on why that may be wrong. We have shown that pregnancy is actually being tracked by the CDC and local state governments who have received their COVID vaccines. We have shown more women who don't get vaccinated while pregnant actually have a 20-fold risk of harm to their fetus and to themselves. And African-American women are some of the highest numbers in that category. So we're the ones who are least likely to get vaccinated while pregnant. So that's another thing to worry about, especially when it comes to the harms of COVID. And then you just restate where the misinformation is wrong and then end with that fact that you started with to begin with, which is pregnancy and vaccinations are safe and has been shown to be helpful for the growing and developing fetus. So that's an example.
Yep. So why do you think that there's so much more negative information, and how do you counter it? And why isn't there more positive information, especially when there is a basis in science that would show people what researchers are talking about as it relates to COVID?
You know, Kimberley, that's the question of the year. I believe you have made an excellent point, and I remember you bringing this up at one of our COVID task force meetings, and I thought it was a stellar idea. And we even have studies to date that show that more of the positive messaging works more effectively than the fear mongering and the stats and the other scientific ways of trying to give that information out. They have pilot studies in Zimbabwe, where they actually looked at texting people about vaccine hesitancy to improve social distancing measures. And they saw a 30% reduction in people breaking those rules. And it was literally from just texting and getting ahead of the misinformation and the negative fear mongering that isn't always effective. We're in a better place now where we not only have more data to look back and see what's working, but we know based on your demographic, your ethnicity, your race, your income level, that different types of messaging will be more important to you. If, say, you're a Latin American person, it has actually been shown in what's called the CIVIS study, which was done just 2 months ago, where they texted people 8 different types of prompts. And they found in just the Latino population that messaging about protecting your children and it being patriotic or American were the 2 biggest driving factors in getting people to consider getting vaccinated. Whereas you're talking about a rich or a middle-class, wealthier white male, the message that actually hit the most for them was the fear of missing out, not being able to travel, not being able to go to their favorite restaurants. So the messaging does matter. And just so you know, to add to that, if you're a conservative person, the messaging that hit home best for them actually was emphasizing that vaccination is an important personal decision. So emphasizing that your personal decision is what matters. However, you're still thinking about potentially leaning towards vaccinating. So emphasizing these different types of messaging shows there are better positive responses than just throwing stats and showing all the fear. So again, I think it's a consistency in the messenger and having a unified effort in the community and from a state and government level that I think is still lacking today.
So Dr. Canterbury, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were lots of images everywhere, especially with people in ICU units. There were pictures of makeshift funeral parlors. There isn't so much of that information being set out anymore, but does that mean that we are out of the woods as far as the viruses are concerned?
I don't think we're quite out of the woods yet. I will say, compared to those images that you were referring to, we didn't have vaccines at the time. We didn't have body bags filling in streets of New York and LA and all across the world, like in India when they had their outbreaks. So we're in a place now where we still are doing better here in America, in the States, where we're seeing about 60% of our population at least having 1 dose. But the truth be told is, as long as the world isn't vaccinated, we're going to always have variants. We're going to always have a media cycle that's focused on the new wave. And we're going to unfortunately have more deaths and cases rise. Now, does that mean that this is going to be forever and ever? I don't think so. I think we're turning ahead. We have several drugs that are out there that are becoming on the market. We have antivirals that you can get an infusion for. We have 2 pills that are under phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials from Pfizer and Merck to reduce the symptoms of COVID. Not to mention we have vaccines that still work. I mean, we have like 3 or 4 different choices. And across the road, we have 20s, if not 30 different choices for people to use. So we're still in the beginning of this. So I don't think that it's hopeless, but I do believe we have our work cut out for us in reaching unvaccinated communities that need it the most.
You are amazing. We have come to the end of the program. Thank you so much, Dr. DeLon Canterbury, for being my guest today. And thank you for being a friend of WNCU.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, audience, for watching via YouTube, on Facebook and Instagram, as well as listening to WNCU. Be sure to like us and follow us and subscribe to our pages to see more of our archived shows. I'm Kimberly Pierce Cartwright, your host for COVID Conversations. Thank you to Duke University School of Medicine and the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, the African American COVID Task Force Plus of Durham, and the Save a Life campaign presented by the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, KTSU, and WNCU 90.7 FM. Thank you so much for listening.